He wasn't at work. Every morning she watched him leave. She heard the front door close. She heard his car pull out of the driveway. And for hours after that, she moved through that house believing she was alone. She wasn't. He was still inside, somewhere in that house, every single day. And she had been living there for 3 weeks before she found out. But that's not even the worst part. The worst part is what she found in her closet. A hole, carefully drilled through the shelf backing. And behind that hole, a lens. Small, black, pointed directly at where she slept. Everything she had done in that room. Every private moment. Every phone call. Every time she got dressed or cried or lay awake at night thinking no one could see her. All of it. Recorded. Tonight, I have 3 stories for you. 3 real accounts from real people who did something most of us have done. Responded to a listing on Craigslist. A free room. A house cleaner. A $45 couch. Each of them took one step toward a stranger who seemed reasonable. Each of them discovered, in their own way, that some people spend a long time making themselves look safe before they show you what they actually are. These stories are real. In some cases, names and minor details have been changed to protect privacy. But what happened? It happened. She was 21 years old, and she had almost nothing going for her. Not said with judgment, just with honesty. She had dropped out of school. Her relationship with her family had collapsed. She had a small handful of people she trusted, and the rest of the world felt like it was accelerating past her in a direction she couldn't follow. Every day was the same, standing behind a counter at a vape shop, watching the clock crawl, going home to a house that didn't feel like home anymore. She describes this period of her life as her attitude era, a time when she had stopped caring about most things, including her own safety. Then one afternoon she opened Craigslist. The ad had been posted by a man named Jackson. Live in arrangement. Free lodging in exchange for basic housekeeping. No childcare. No background check required. Just someone to keep the place clean and occasionally cook while he was at work. He had included 10 photos of the house. Modest, slightly old-fashioned, but perfectly livable. She says it wasn't even the house that caught her attention. It was the words "no background check required." That, to a 21-year-old with nothing and nowhere else to go, felt like a door opening. She texted the number without telling a single person. Jackson responded within minutes. The conversation moved fast. He had answers for everything. He'd be gone most of the day. She'd have the place to herself. He'd cover groceries. She just needed to keep things clean and put in a decent effort at dinner a few nights a week. Every answer made the next question feel unnecessary. There was one moment that gave her a slight pause. He asked early on what her gender was. When she told him she was female, she noticed his responses seemed to get longer, more engaged, more warm. She told herself most people preferred a female housekeeper anyway. He invited her to see the place that same afternoon. When she pulled up, everything around the house checked out. Normal neighborhood. Quiet street. The neighbors had flowers out front, decorations in windows, signs of ordinary family life. She told herself this was a good sign, that normal surroundings meant a normal situation. And when the door opened, she was looking at a man much older than she had pictured. She had imagined someone around 45. Instead, she was looking at a man closer to 60. Tall, gray beard, a little heavy. And before she had even stepped inside, he pulled her into a hug. A complete stranger. And he hugged her immediately. She says, and this is the part that still bothers her to think about, it didn't feel threatening. His warmth made her feel comfortable. She walked into that house already trusting him a little. He gave her the tour. Kitchen, living room, dining room, upstairs, 4 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. He showed her the guest room she'd use, the bathroom, an office down the hall she was welcome to use, his room at the end, and then, at the very end of the hallway, 1 more door. He walked past it without a word. She noticed. She didn't ask. The basement was unfinished, he told her. Just laundry and a workout area. Nothing else. he did not show her the backyard. She accepted the arrangement on the spot. 2 days later, she came back with her things. She told her parents she had gotten an apartment. She didn't say anything else. The first night, she noticed the cameras. They weren't hidden, or at least, they weren't trying to look hidden. Small black cameras in the upper corners of the living room and the kitchen. She told herself it was reasonable. He was letting a stranger move into his home. Security cameras made sense. But she wished he had mentioned them. That was the first thing that felt slightly wrong. The second thing happened later that same night, somewhere around 1:30 in the morning. She was almost asleep when she heard it. A door closing somewhere on the lower floor. Soft, deliberate. She lay there listening. Nothing followed. She told herself it was an old house. Old wood. Normal sounds at night. The first week passed without incident. Jackson was gone during the days as promised. In the evenings, they had brief surface-level conversations. She cooked several nights in a row, and he seemed genuinely appreciative. She started thinking she had overreacted to everything. Then came the night she made pasta. She's honest about the fact that she's not a skilled cook. She did her best. But when Jackson came home that night, he was already tired and visibly irritable. He took one bite. His expression shifted in a way she had not seen from him before. He said it tasted bland. She offered to season it differently, offered to make something else. And then something in him changed. He said if she was going to live there for free, the least she could do was learn to cook something edible. He pushed the plate away. He stood up. He told her to clean the mess she'd made in his kitchen. And he walked to his bedroom without another word. She says what alarmed her most wasn't even what he said. It was how fast it happened. The shift from warm and easygoing to cold and contemptuous, less than 60 seconds. She cleaned the kitchen quietly and told herself everyone has bad days. The next morning she apologized to him, even though she didn't feel she had done anything wrong. He laughed it off like it was nothing. And then, with a smile on his face, he suggested that maybe she could make it up to him by cleaning the house that day in her underwear. He said she needed to relax, that it was just a joke. She laughed along. She didn't know what else to do. But she says she stood in that kitchen after he had gone upstairs, after his footsteps had faded, and felt something she hadn't felt in that house before. Not just discomfort. Something colder than that. The feeling that she was inside something she didn't fully understand yet, and that the man upstairs understood it very well. That night she texted her closest friend for the first time about the arrangement. She told her everything. The setup, the cameras, the comment. Her friend told her she was out of her mind for staying and to leave immediately. She didn't leave. Going home felt like admitting defeat, and in her state of mind at the time, defeat felt worse than risk. The following Monday, she was driving to the grocery store when a car behind her started laying on the horn. It matched her speed. When she pulled over, the car stopped behind her, and a young woman got out and walked to her window. She looked roughly the same age. She asked if the girl in the car was currently living at Jackson's house. And when she confirmed that yes, she was, the young woman's expression shifted into something urgent. She had been the previous occupant. She had held the same arrangement in the same house with the same man. And here is what she told her. Jackson wasn't his real name. He had cameras throughout the house watching her constantly. She had started to realize he knew things he had no way of knowing, things she had done privately in rooms she thought were empty. When she tried to leave, he made it extremely difficult. He interrogated her about where she was going, when she would be back, what she was doing, every time she walked toward the door. And then one night, she woke up and found him leaving her bedroom. But the part that made the girl in the car feel physically ill was this. Jackson didn't have a job. He had never had a job. Every morning that she had watched him leave, every morning she had believed she had the house to herself. He had not actually gone anywhere. He was still there, somewhere in that house, every single day. She sat in her car trying to absorb what she had just been told. She thought about every strange sound at night, every floor creak she had rationalized away. Every morning she had spent moving through those rooms believing she was completely alone. The young woman gave her specific instructions for leaving. Act completely normal. Remove belongings slowly, small bag at a time. Nothing conspicuous. When you leave for the last time, make it look like you're running a quick errand. Do not confront him. Not let him know you know anything. That night, back inside the house, she checked her room. It didn't take long. On the top shelf of the closet, pushed into the far corner behind a box, she found it. A tiny black lens, pointed outward through a small hole that had been carefully drilled into the shelf backing, positioned to face the center of the room. The bed. She put the box back exactly as she had found it. She lay in the dark that night thinking about every moment she had spent in that room. Getting dressed. Phone calls. The nights she had cried when things felt like too much. All of it watched. At some point deep in the night, she heard her bedroom door creak open. She turned to look. It was Jackson, standing in the doorway, looking at her. When he saw her eyes open, he apologized for waking her and closed the door. She says she has never been more terrified in her life, and she has never been more grateful that she couldn't sleep. The next morning, she began her exit exactly as she had been told. 1 small bag per day. Nothing that would draw attention. 3 days later, she drove away while he was supposedly at work, though she now understood those words meant nothing. He texted her repeatedly after she left. She told him she had decided to move back home and thanked him for the opportunity. He kept pressing. He wanted her to come back in person. He wanted to talk. She never responded again. About a week later, she received a notification. Someone had attempted to log into one of her personal accounts. The login attempt had originated from the same town where his house was located. She changed every password she had. She says she doesn't know what his intentions were. And honestly, she says, she doesn't want to know. Nothing technically happened to her. But she believes with absolute certainty that if she had stayed even a few days longer, it would have. David works long hours. He bought a house a couple of years before this happened. 2 floors, modest size, more space than he actually needed for one person. And somewhere in the blur of long workdays, he had fallen completely behind on keeping the place clean. No matter how many times he told himself he'd get to it that weekend, the weekend came and went and nothing changed. One evening, he came across a simple listing on Craigslist. Independent cleaner. Cash only. Flexible schedule. He reached out that same night. She responded the next morning. She usually worked apartments, she said, but houses were fine. They made arrangements. She would come on a Thursday while he was at work. He'd leave the back door unlocked for her. Before he left that morning, he locked his valuables in a secure closet. He mentions this detail later like a footnote, like a man who did one thing right and is still trying to figure out how it wasn't enough. He met her briefly before leaving. Late 30s. Quiet. She didn't make much eye contact. He figured she was just on the reserved side. She asked the standard questions. How big was the house? Any pets? Did she need to worry about any particular room? He told her the office was off limits. And then she asked what time he usually got home. He told her around 6, sometimes closer to 7 depending on traffic. At the time, he didn't think anything of it. She probably just wanted to know when to be finished. He didn't give it another thought. When he got home that evening, the house looked genuinely excellent. Floors clean. Counters shining. Everything smelled fresh. He paid her what they had agreed on, and that was that. For about a week, nothing was wrong. Then the sound started. The first time was somewhere around 2 or 3 in the morning. He's a light sleeper, so waking in the middle of the night wasn't unusual. What was slightly unusual was a soft thump from somewhere downstairs. He lay there and listened. Nothing followed. He decided it was the house settling and went back to sleep. A couple of nights later, he woke again. This time what he heard was different. It sounded, specifically, like a cabinet door closing. He lay completely still, listening. Nothing. He told himself he was half asleep and imagining things. He didn't go downstairs to check. Over the following week, he started noticing small things around the house that felt slightly off, but nothing dramatic enough to fully alarm him on its own. A kitchen cabinet left open a few inches when he was sure he had closed it. A dining room chair pulled out at an odd angle. One Saturday morning, he reached for the hand towel in the downstairs bathroom and stopped. It was damp. He lives alone. He had not used that bathroom. Each thing had an explanation if he worked hard enough to find one. He told himself he must have left the cabinet open, must have moved the chair. Maybe the towel absorbed humidity from the air. But the sounds at night kept happening. Always soft. Always just close enough to the edge of explainable that he could talk himself out of them in the daylight. One night he heard what he could only describe as a single slow footstep. He convinced himself it was the floorboards contracting in the temperature change. He started sleeping with his bedroom door closed. One night he woke and was nearly certain he could feel pressure shifting in the floor just outside his bedroom door. The specific sensation of weight on old wood, like someone standing very still on the other side. He stared at the door handle and waited. It didn't move. Eventually, he fell back asleep. He felt embarrassed about it in the morning. Around this time, he reached out to the cleaner about coming back. The house genuinely needed another round, and he had mostly convinced himself that stress from work was making him hypersensitive to every sound a house makes at night. She came again. Same arrangement. Back door unlocked while he was at work. When he got home, the place looked excellent again. She asked if he wanted to set something up regularly. He said maybe once a month. About a week after her second visit, he started noticing something new. Food was disappearing faster than it should have been. One night, he was almost positive there had been one more yogurt in the refrigerator. The next morning, it was gone. A loaf of bread seemed to be running out faster than he could account for. One morning, he found a glass sitting in the kitchen sink that he had absolutely no memory of using. He Googled sleepwalking. He genuinely sat there wondering whether he might be moving through his own house at night without remembering it. And then came the night that removed every last doubt. He woke up clearly and completely, not groggy, not half in a dream, and heard footsteps downstairs. Not the house settling. Not a creak. Footsteps. The sound of weight shifting deliberately from one foot to the other, crossing his floor below. He grabbed his phone. About 10 seconds later, something lightly bumped against a wall. He did not go downstairs. He'll be the first to tell you that. He sat in his bed completely still for nearly 30 minutes before the sound stopped. And then he went back to sleep. He says it was the closest thing to cowardice he has ever felt. But he also says that genuine physical fear, the kind that floods your body and turns your legs to concrete, doesn't always let you move the way you think it will. Morning came. He checked every room. Every window and door was locked. He went to the basement. Nothing. But a few days later, he opened his kitchen junk drawer and stopped cold. He kept spare keys in that drawer. 2 of them on a small ring. One was missing. He tore the house apart looking for it. Every drawer, every coat pocket, every surface. It was gone. He stood in his kitchen and thought about the cleaner. She had been alone in his home twice, for hours each time. The junk drawer was not hidden. It was not locked. It was the kind of thing anyone curious could have found in under 30 seconds. He started locking his bedroom door at night. About 4 nights later, he made a decision. He left for work as normal, drove a few blocks, turned around, parked on a parallel street, and walked quietly back to his own house. He let himself in through the back. He went upstairs, and he waited. At around 11 in the morning, he heard his front door unlock. He moved to a position near the top of the staircase where he could partially see the ground floor through the railing. A woman walked in. No cleaning supplies. She walked directly to the kitchen, opened his refrigerator, took out a drink, and sat down at his kitchen table. She sat there quietly for several minutes. Then she stood up and began walking slowly around his living room, looking at things. She picked up a framed photograph, him and his brother, and stood there staring at it. Then she turned toward the staircase. He backed up silently into his bedroom and closed the door without a sound. He could hear her crossing toward the stairs. He heard her come halfway up, and then she stopped. The shadow under his door told him everything. She was standing directly on the other side. She didn't move. He stood there for what felt like a full minute, maybe longer. He couldn't tell. And then he decided to open the door. He flung it open and nearly stumbled backward. She was standing mere feet away, and she was already looking directly at the door as he opened it, as if she had known the exact moment he would. But as he got a clear look at her, something stopped him completely. It wasn't the cleaner. It was a different woman entirely. Similar in some general way, but a completely different person. Someone he had never seen before in his life. And her expression, this is the part he says he cannot get out of his head, was completely blank. Not startled. Not embarrassed. Not caught. She looked at him with something he can only describe as flat. Empty. Almost hostile. Like she had been expecting this moment and had already decided how she felt about it. Neither of them said a word. She held his gaze for a few seconds. Then she slowly turned, walked back down the stairs, and left through the front door as calmly as if she had just finished an errand. He stood in his hallway shaking for several minutes before he could dial 911. The police took down everything he had. The cleaner's phone number, her email, every detail he could remember about both women. The original cleaner went completely silent from that point. No response to calls, no response to messages, nothing. He replaced every lock in his house the same day he gave his statement. And when one of the responding officers asked almost casually whether he had given anyone else a spare key, and he said no, the officer looked at him and said something that has stayed with him ever since. Sometimes people like that don't work alone. This last story happened fast. The first two unfolded slowly, days and weeks of things shifting gradually from strange to terrifying, giving the people in them just enough time to almost adjust before the next thing happened. This one was a single night, one listing, one decision, and a series of seconds during which the difference between surviving and not surviving came down almost entirely to luck. He was 22 years old in 2008. He had just gone through a painful breakup. His girlfriend had ended things abruptly and asked him to leave their shared apartment with almost no notice. He was sleeping on a friend's couch, making $7 an hour, trying to figure out his next move with almost no resources and no real plan. He wasn't even looking for housing on Craigslist. He says that was a hard pass for him even then. But he was looking for furniture, affordable pieces he could store at his friend's place until he had somewhere permanent to land. One afternoon, he found a listing. A man named Keith was selling a sectional sofa for $45. There were photos. The couch looked great. The price was extraordinarily low, but Keith had an explanation ready. He had just accepted a job in another state. He needed to move things out quickly. That explanation made the price make sense. It made Keith seem like a real person with a real situation. He messaged Keith. Keith responded almost immediately. The couch was still available. They exchanged numbers. They agreed to meet that evening. He would spend years thinking about that decision, not because of what it taught him about Craigslist, but because of what it taught him about how predators prepare, how they construct an ordinary surface over something that is anything but. He arrived at the address around 9 o'clock at night. He acknowledges now that the hour was a red flag, but Keith had said he had prior commitments and couldn't meet earlier, and at 22, 9 o'clock at night felt like a reasonable inconvenience rather than a warning. What the street looked like when he got there, that gave him a different feeling. It was dark in a way that felt wrong. No working street lamps. Every house on the block was unlit, windows dark, exteriors run down in a way that suggested the entire neighborhood had been quietly left behind. He describes it as the kind of street that feels like it exists slightly outside of normal time. Like the rest of the world stopped checking on it years ago. He called the number Keith had given him. Automated message. The number was no longer in service. He sat in his car already thinking about leaving. And then his phone buzzed. Unknown number. Different area code. He answered. The voice on the other end was friendly in a way that felt slightly off, almost aggressively worn, with an erratic energy underneath it. The man called him fella. He apologized about the phone situation, explained he had broken his regular phone and was using a work cell. He asked the young man to come around to the back of the house, where the door would be unlocked for him. He went. He says he wasn't even thinking about worst-case scenarios at that point. He was thinking about the couch. He had already made the mental purchase. He was just there to collect it. The backyard was just as dark as the front. He stood at the back door and waited. He decided to call the number again. He pressed dial, and instead of hearing the ring through his phone, he heard a ringtone. Not from inside the house. From the bushes. Behind him. A man came running out of the bushes, phone in hand. Waving it like this was completely normal. He introduced himself as Keith. He said he had been out back getting rid of old food, that he liked to leave scraps for the animals that lived in the brush. He was smiling, relaxed, apologetic about the confusion. And this is the part that speaks to how well these situations are constructed. Even standing in a dark backyard at 9 at night, watching a man emerge from the bushes with a phone in his hand, the young man says something in him was still trying to make it make sense. Still trying to find the version of this story where everything was fine. Keith moved to the back door and started fumbling with the handle, struggling to get it open. He apologized, said the door stuck sometimes, said it needed a firm push. He asked the young man to just lean into it, put his shoulder against it and push. He grabbed the handle. He lowered his shoulder into the door. It didn't stick at all, because someone on the other side pulled it open from within. He had so much forward momentum that he lost his footing completely and fell hard to the floor inside. And then he heard Keith's voice from behind him. Now, from both sides of the dark room, figures emerged. He couldn't see them. There was almost no light. He could only feel the weight of hands pressing him down to the floor. He started fighting, twisting, pulling, trying to get his arms free. One of the men was enormous. He could feel the size of him even in the dark. Keith was kicking him in the face. He says the darkness was the worst part. Unable to see anything, unable to get his bearings, the sounds of the room became overwhelming. Voices, movement, and then, somewhere nearby, someone asking for tape. And then something happened that he can only describe as a miracle. Somewhere during the fall, during the chaos of hands and boots and concrete floor, his phone had pocket-dialed his friend, the friend whose couch he had been sleeping on. From the floor somewhere close to him, he could hear it, a tiny voice calling hello through the phone speaker. He had 1 second, maybe less. He made a decision. He yelled out, loud, as convincingly as he could, "I'm around back, come help me." It was a complete bluff. His friend was nowhere near that street. He was alone. He was on the ground. He had nothing except the sound of a voice on a phone and 1 fraction of a second to make 3 men believe that help was already arriving. The large man holding him shifted, looked at Keith. Keith stopped. That was all he needed. He broke free. He ran for the back door, and he did not stop running. He could hear them behind him, but he did not look back. He hit his car, got in, locked the door, started the engine. Just as he was pulling away, the large man caught up and grabbed the door handle, trying to wrench it open while the car was already in motion. He drove anyway. The grip broke. He kept going. He drove for hours before going back to his friend's place. Not because he didn't know the way, because he was terrified of being followed. He needed to be sure no one knew where he was sleeping before he stopped moving. When he finally reported everything to police, they investigated the listing and the phone numbers. The post had already been taken down. The cell phone Keith had been using was a prepaid disposable with no name attached to it. As far as he knows, Keith and the 2 men in that room were never identified, never found. And the thing that haunts him most isn't what happened. It's the question he can't stop asking himself 17 years later. What were they going to do with the tape? This wasn't a robbery. Nobody lures someone with a $45 couch listing to steal their wallet. Whatever those 3 men had planned for that night, it wasn't about money. And he knows that. He has always known that. He says when he lies awake thinking about it, which he still does, he thinks about the phone call, the accident of it. The fact that his phone hit something during the fall at exactly the right moment. That his friend happened to answer. that he had 1 second to think clearly enough to use it. He says he doesn't know what he believes about luck or fate or whatever you want to call it. But he knows that he is alive because of a phone that dialed by itself in the dark. And he tries not to think too hard about what that means for everyone who wasn't that lucky. 3 stories. 3 people who did something most of us have done without a second thought, responded to a listing online, accepted an offer that seemed reasonable, trusted a stranger just enough to take 1 step forward. And for each of them, that 1 step led somewhere they never could have imagined. I want to say something clearly before we end tonight. The people in these stories are not foolish. They are not reckless. They made normal human decisions under circumstances that were carefully designed to look ordinary. That is exactly what makes this so unsettling. The danger wasn't visible. It was constructed not to be. These situations didn't look like traps because the people building them had put real effort into making sure they wouldn't. So the next time you see a listing that feels almost too convenient, a price that lands exactly right, the offer that appears at exactly the moment you needed it, take 1 extra breath. Tell someone where you're going. Do 1 more check than you think you need to do. Because the things that actually get people are almost never the things that look dangerous from a distance. They are the things that look perfectly fine. If these stories reached you tonight, share this video. You never know whose life it might protect. Before I go, I want to hear from you. Have you ever responded to a listing online, met a stranger from the internet, or walked into a situation that started feeling wrong the moment you got there? Maybe nothing happened. Maybe something did. Maybe you got out and still think about it. Tell me in the comments what happened and what made you realize something was off. I read every single one, and sometimes the most important stories are the ones that never made the news. Stay aware. Stay safe. I'll see you in the next one.